The rain came down heavier than expected that night, turning the quiet streets into streams of rushing water. The little town on the edge of the city wasn't used to storms like this. Windows rattled, roofs leaked, and most people hurried inside, grateful for the warmth of their homes. But not everyone had a place to run to. A man named Daniel stood on the porch of his modest little house, trying to coax his old porch light to stay on. He was in his mid-30s, dressed in worn jeans and a plain shirt. The lines on his face seemed older than they should have been for someone his age, the kind of lines carved not by years, but by responsibility. He was a single father, raising his 7-year-old daughter Lily, all on his own. Life hadn't been kind to him. His wife had passed away years ago, and since then, he'd been working odd jobs, fixing roofs, repairing cars, painting fence, anything that put food on the table. Their house was small, just 2 bedrooms, but it was full of love, and that mattered more than anything. As he tightened the bulb and finally got the light flickering. Daniel heard footsteps splashing on the wet road. He turned his head and saw a figure moving toward his gate. At first, he thought it was just a neighbor hurrying home, but the closer she came, the more unusual it seemed. It was a young woman, probably in her early 20s, drenched from head to toe. She wasn't dressed for rain at all. She wore a thin jacket and sneakers that were soaked through. Her hair stuck to her face, and she looked cold, lost, and exhausted. Excuse me. She called softly, her voice trembling from the cold. "I'm so sorry to bother you, but could you help me? I don't have anywhere to go tonight." Daniel hesitated. Stranger at his doorstep in the middle of a storm, it wasn't something that happened often. He looked past her, wondering if someone else was nearby, but the street was empty. His instincts told him to be cautious, but then he looked at her again. She wasn't threatening. She looked vulnerable, maybe even frightened. And Daniel had always been the kind of man who couldn't walk away when someone was in need. "You're out here all alone?" he asked. She nodded quickly. I just need a place to stay for the night. I'll leave in the morning, I promise." "Won't cause any trouble." Daniel rubbed the back of his neck. His house wasn't much, but he couldn't imagine letting anyone, especially someone so young, wander the streets in weather like this. He thought of Lily sleeping soundly inside and wondered what he would want someone to do for her if she were ever stranded like this someday. "All right," he finally said, opening the door wider. "You can come in for the night, but just for the night." Relief washed over her face, and she stepped onto the porch, murmuring a grateful thank you before entering. The inside of Daniel's house was simple but warm. The furniture was second-hand, the wallpaper slightly faded, but everything was clean. A small lamp lit the living room, where toys were scattered across the rug. The girl looked around as if she hadn't been inside such a modest home in a long time. She seemed both curious and strangely comforted by it. "You're soaked," Daniel said, heading toward the hallway closet. "I'll grab you a towel. You'll catch your death out there like this." When he returned, he handed her the towel, and she wrapped it around herself gratefully. He studied her for a moment. She was young, probably no older than 22. Her clothes were fashionable, or at least they had been before being ruined by the rain. Her shoes, though muddy now, looked expensive. Something about her didn't quite fit the image of someone who had nowhere to go, but Daniel wasn't the kind to pry. "Thank you again," she said softly. "I know this is strange. I didn't know what else to do." "You're lucky you're knocked here," Daniel replied. Not everyone would have opened the door. She gave a small, tired smile, but didn't explain further. Just then, a small voice came from the hallway. "Daddy." Daniel turned to see Lily, her dark hair messy from sleep, rubbing her eyes. She clutched her stuffed rabbit to her chest and looked curiously at the stranger standing in the living room. "It's all right, sweetheart," Daniel said gently. "Go back to bed. Daddy's just helping someone out." But Lily, ever the curious one, walked closer. "Who is she?" The girl crouched down slightly, smiling warmly at her. "I'm just a friend passing through." "You must be Lily." Asterisk Lily nodded, her eyes widening. How do you know my name? Asterisk Daniel chuckled. She guessed. Kiddo. Now go on, back to bed. Asterisk still, Lily lingered, clearly fascinated by the guest. It wasn't often they had visitors. Finally, Daniel picked her up and carried her back to her room, tucking her in again and assuring her everything was fine. Asterisk, when he returned, the girl was sitting on the couch, her hands folded neatly in her lap. She looked nervous, as though she didn't quite know what to do with herself. Asterisk, you can sleep in here, Daniel said.
Oh.
The couch pulls out into a bed. It's not fancy, but it'll do. Asterisk, that's more than enough, she said sincerely. You've already been kinder than you had to be. Asterisk, he nodded, pulling out some blankets from the closet and setting them down. He noticed her hands trembling slightly as she took them. Asterisk, you all right? He asked. Asterisk, she hesitated, then nodded quickly. Yes, just cold, that's all. Asterisk Daniel didn't press further. He had a sense she wasn't telling him everything, but he respected her silence. Everyone had their own burdens. Asterisk as she lay down for the night. Daniel turned off the lamp and retreated to his own room, though sleep didn't come easily. Couldn't help wondering who she was, why she was out in the storm, and why someone who clearly came from money was wandering the streets alone. Asterisk the girl, meanwhile, stared at the ceiling in the darkness. Her name was Isabella, though she hadn't given it to him. She was the daughter of one of the wealthiest businessmen in the city. Her father owned companies that stretched across industries: real estate, technology, investments. She had grown up surrounded by luxury mansions, private schools, designer clothes. Tonight, none of that mattered. Tonight, she was just a girl running from a life that had begun to suffocate her. Asterisk, her father had been trying to arrange her future without asking what she wanted. She had discovered that morning he intended to marry her off to the son of one of his business partners, to strengthen their alliance. Isabella had argued, begged, and finally fled, taking only her phone and wallet. But in the storm, her phone had slipped from her hand and been lost in the rushing water. Her wallet had been stolen hours earlier by someone who had offered her directions. Now she had nothing, no money, no way to call anyone, and no desire to return home to a life that felt like a gilded cage. Asterisk. As she lay there, she thought of the man and his daughter. They had so little, yet they had given her more kindness than she had seen in years. She closed her eyes, wondering what they would think if they knew the truth about her. Asterisk, the storm outside eventually quieted, and the house grew silent. In that small, modest home, Isabella drifted into the first peaceful sleep she'd had in a long time. Asterisk. Morning came with the sound of birds and the smell of something cooking. Isabella sat up, surprised by the warmth in the room. She folded the blankets neatly before standing and walking toward the kitchen, where she found Daniel frying eggs while Lily sat at the table coloring with crayons. Asterisk. Morning, Daniel said when he noticed her. Hope you slept all right. Asterisk. I did, Isabella admitted. Better than I expected. Thank you. Asterisk. Lily looked up, her eyes bright. Do you want breakfast with us? Daddy makes the best eggs. Asterisk. Isabella smiled, something soft flickering in her chest. She hadn't sat down for a meal like this in years, not one that felt so real. Asterisk. I'd love to, she said. Sitting down at the table, Asterisk Daniel set a plate in front of her, and she couldn't help but notice how he gave Lily the biggest portion without even thinking about it. It was a small detail, but it spoke volumes. Asterisk. As they ate, Lily asked endless questions about Isabella, where she was from, what she liked to do if she had a family. Isabella answered carefully, avoiding the truth. She said she had grown up in the city, that she liked to read, and that she wasn't close to her family. That last part wasn't entirely a lie. Asterisk. Daniel listened quietly, watching her with a thoughtful expression. Could tell she was hiding something, but he didn't push. Figured she'd share if she wanted to. Asterisk. After breakfast, Isabella offered to help wash the dishes, but Daniel shook his head. You're a guest. Don't worry about it. Asterisk. She insisted anyway, rolling up her sleeves and standing at the sink beside him. Lily giggled at the sight of her helping as though it were some rare event, and in a way it was. Isabella had never washed dishes before in her life, but she found herself enjoying it, the simplicity of it, the normalcy. As the day stretched on, she realized she didn't want to leave. Not yet. The world outside felt too heavy, too full of expectations waiting to drag her back. Here, in this tiny house with a man who had nothing yet offered her everything, she felt a kind of peace she'd never known. What she didn't realize was that her disappearance was already making headlines. Her father had the police searching. For her, detectives were combing the city, and her photo was plastered across the news. Somewhere, someone would eventually recognize her. But for now, she was safe in the home of a poor single dad who had taken in a strange girl for one night. Unaware she was the daughter of a millionaire, and that night was only the beginning. The following day passed in a blur of small, ordinary things, and Isabella found herself cherishing each one. She played board games with Lily, helped Daniel repair a leaky faucet, and even accompanied them to the grocery store where Daniel carefully calculated every purchase to make sure he didn't overspend. It was a stark contrast to the world she had left behind her, a world where her father's staff bought everything without a second thought, where money flowed like water but warmth was scarce. When they returned home, Daniel carried Lily to her room for a nap, and Isabella sat quietly in the living room, flipping through a children's book Lily had left behind. She could hear Daniel moving around in the kitchen, and something about the sound felt strangely comforting. For the first time in a long while, she felt like she belonged somewhere, even if only temporarily. Later that evening, after Lily had gone to bed, Daniel brought out 2 mugs of tea and placed one in front of her. He sat across from her at the table, his eyes steady but kind. You planning on telling me what you're running from? He asked finally. Isabella froze, her hands tightening around the mug. She had been waiting for this question, but she wasn't sure she was ready to answer it. I can't go back home, she said carefully. It's complicated. Most things are, Daniel replied evenly. But if you're in trouble, I should know. I've got Lily to think about. That reminder struck her deeply. He wasn't suspicious out of cruelty, he was protecting his daughter. It made her respect him even more. I'm not dangerous, she whispered. I promise you that. I didn't want to live the life my father was forcing on me. I left, and now I don't know what to do. Daniel leaned back in his chair, studying her. Could see the truth in her eyes, even if she wasn't giving him the full story. He nodded slowly. Everyone deserves the chance to choose their own path, he said. You're welcome here until you figure things out. The relief that washed over her was overwhelming. She blinked back sudden tears and nodded gratefully. Thank you, she murmured. Days turned into a week. What was supposed to be one night stretched longer as Isabella found herself drawn deeper into the small rhythms of their life. She helped Lily with her homework, cooked dinners with Daniel, and even began to pick up small cleaning jobs alongside him to contribute. It felt almost like a family, something she had never truly experienced despite growing up in a mansion filled with staff and wealth. But outside their little world, reality was closing in. Posters with her face hung on bulletin boards and shop windows. The local news covered her disappearance daily, and her father had offered a hefty reward for any information. It was only a matter of time before someone recognized her. The first. Crack came one afternoon when Isabella went to the market alone to pick up some bread. The shopkeeper, a middle-aged woman with sharp eyes, stared at her a little too long. Isabella felt a pang of fear but forced a smile, quickly paying and hurrying out. She told herself she was imagining things, but deep down, she knew she wasn't. That evening, while washing dishes, she glanced at Daniel. Do you ever feel like the world is watching, waiting for you to slip? He gave her a puzzled look. Not really. My world's too small for anyone to care what I do. Why? She hesitated, then shook her head. Nothing. Just thinking. But the feeling lingered. The truth finally came crashing down 2 nights later. They were sitting at the dinner table when there was a knock at the door, loud, insistent. Daniel frowned, rising to answer it. When he opened the door, two men in suits stood there, their expressions hard and professional. Asterisk, Mr. Miller, one of them asked. Asterisk, yes, Daniel replied cautiously. Asterisk, we're looking for someone. A young woman, early 20s, dark hair. She's been missing for over a week. Have you seen her? Asterisk, Daniel's heart thudded. He turned slightly, and his eyes flicked toward the living room where Isabella sat frozen. She could hear every word, her pulse racing. Asterisk, the men pulled out a photo. It was her. Asterisk, Daniel looked at the photo, then at Isabella, then back at the men. He hesitated for a long moment before shaking his head. Sorry, haven't seen her. Asterisk, the men studied him, clearly unconvinced, but after a tense pause, they handed him a card. If you do, call this number. There's a reward for any information. Asterisk, when they left, Daniel shut the door and locked it. He turned slowly to Isabella, his face unreadable. Asterisk, you want to explain? He asked quietly. Asterisk, tears welled in her eyes as she stood. I didn't mean to drag you into this. I didn't know where else to go. I'm sorry, Asterisk. Who are you really? Asterisk. She swallowed hard. My name is Isabella Carter. My father is James Carter. Asterisk, Daniel's eyes widened. In the city knew that name. James Carter was one of the richest men in the country. Asterisk, you're his daughter. Asterisk, she nodded miserably. I couldn't take it anymore. He wants to control my life, make me marry someone I don't love. I ran. And then I lost everything, my phone, my money. I had nowhere to go until I found your house. Asterisk, Daniel ran a hand over his face. A millionaire's daughter, sitting in his tiny kitchen, washing his dishes, reading bedtime stories to his daughter. The absurdity of it hit him like a wave. You should have told me, he said finally. I was afraid, she admitted. Afraid. You'd send me back? Afraid you'd treat me differently? Asterisk, Daniel sighed. He wanted to be angry, but looking at her, he couldn't. She had been honest about one thing. She wasn't dangerous. She was just lost. Asterisk, before he could respond, Lily wandered in, rubbing her eyes. What's going on? His desk. Nothing, sweetheart, Daniel said quickly, forcing a smile. Just grown-up stuff. Go back to bed. Asterisk. But Lily looked at Isabella and frowned. You're crying? Don't cry. She walked over and hugged Isabella tightly. You can stay. I like you. Asterisk, Isabella broke down, hugging the little girl back as tears streamed down her face. Daniel's chest tightened at the sight. He couldn't deny how much Isabella had become a part of their lives in such a short time. Asterisk, the next morning. The situation grew more complicated. A news van rolled slowly down their street, reporters scanning every yard. Someone had tipped them off. Asterisk, we can't hide you forever, Daniel said, seriously, as he watched from the window. I'll find you. I know, Isabella whispered. He turned to her. What do you want me to do? Call them. Tell them you're here. Asterisk. She looked torn apart inside. I don't want to go back, but I can't put you and Lily in danger either. If they find out you helped me, they could make things hard for you. Daniel was quiet for a long moment, then said, Sometimes doing the right thing means letting go, even if it hurts. Those words sank deep into her heart. Later that afternoon, Isabella made her decision. She sat with Lily one last time, reading her a bedtime story, even though it wasn't bedtime yet. Lily clung to her, not wanting her to leave. Asterisk, will you come back? Lily asked. Asterisk, Isabella smiled through her tears. I'll try, sweetheart, I promise. Asterisk, when she stood, Daniel was waiting by the door. He didn't speak, but his eyes said everything. Together, they walked outside to the corner of the street where a police car idled, waiting. Asterisk, Isabella turned to him. Thank you, she whispered, for giving me something real, for showing me what family feels like. Asterisk, he swallowed hard. Take care of yourself, Isabella. Asterisk, she leaned in, kissed Lily's forehead, then hugged Daniel tightly, and then she walked away. her figure growing smaller as she approached the waiting car. Asterisk Daniel stood on the porch, holding Lily's hand, watching until she was gone. Asterisk days passed. The house felt quieter without her laughter, emptier without her presence. Life returned to its simple routines, but something had changed. Daniel found himself thinking about her often, wondering if she was safe, wondering if she remembered them. Asterisk, and then, one morning, a sleek black car pulled up outside their house. Daniel stepped onto the porch, frowning, as the driver opened the back door. Isabella stepped out, dressed elegantly, but smiling the same warm smile he remembered. Asterisk Isabella? Breathed. Asterisk she walked up the path, her eyes shining. I told Lily I'd try to come back. Asterisk Lily came running out, squealing with joy as she hugged her. Daniel stood frozen, overwhelmed with shock and relief. Asterisk I spoke to my father, Isabella said, her voice steady. I told him I wasn't going to live under his control anymore. Didn't like it, but he agreed to let me make my own choices. And one of my choices was to see you again. Asterisk Daniel's heart pounded. Why us? Asterisk, because you showed me more kindness with nothing than I ever had with everything, she said softly. Because you and Lily are the first people who made me feel like I mattered, not for my name, not for my money, but for me. Asterisk for a moment, the world seemed to stop, and Daniel smiled, something rare and genuine. Asterisk welcome back, he said. Asterisk, and in that small, humble home, the poor single dad, his daughter, and the millionaire's daughter began a new chapter 1. Built not on wealth or status, but on love, trust, and the family they had all been searching for.